Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today we are going to discuss 3.7 graphing inequalities in two variables. So a couple of things we need to take note in order to do this is we use a solid line if an equal sign appears, so if it's less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and a dashed line if it's just less than or just greater than. So when we are graphing inequality, what we want to do is we want to start by graphing the equation, pretending that it was just an equation. So if I were graphing y is less than or equal to negative 3x minus 2, that has a y-intercept of negative 2 and a slope of negative 3. So I start by graphing those. So I start at negative 2, and I do a slope of negative 3, which I'm going to go up 3, left 1, up 3, left 1. And now I look at the equation, or at the inequality, and I see that it's less than or equal to, so that's a solid line. And then I'm going to connect those with a solid line. Now I need to decide which way to shade. I think the best way to decide is to use the test point. And the test point I use, unless the line goes through it, is the origin. So I'm going to use the test point 0, 0, and I substitute it into my inequality. So that becomes 0 is less than negative 3 times 0 minus 2, which says 0 is less than or equal to negative 2. That is false, which means I want to shade away from the origin. So I shade this side, and I use straight lines to shade. I don't color. And then I label my inequality in that shaded region. So y is less than or equal to negative 3x minus 2. And that's the graph of that inequality. So now, number 1, I'm on a graph y is less than 4. So the first thing I do is I graph the equation y equals 4. So the equation y equals 4 is the line, horizontal line going through the y-axis at 4. So I'm going to do some points. Now I look back at my inequality. This is just less than, so that's a dotted line. And then less than, so I put 0 in. So 0 is less than 4. That's true, so I'm going to shade down. And I write my inequality down here. Y is less than 4. Number 2. Again, I start off by graphing the equation x equals 1. So that's a horizontal or a vertical line, at 1. And I knew that it was solid because it's greater than or equal to. I'm going to do that again. The equal to is what makes it solid. So then if I put in 0, 0 is not less than 1. So that means I'm going to shade away from 0. And that's the inequality graph. Number 3, 3x is less than or equal to y. So that has a y-intercept of 0 and a slope of 3. So I start at 0 and I go up 3, over 1. Do the same thing backwards, down 3, left 1, and I get this line. 0, 0 cannot be my test point this time. And I knew that it was solid because it's equal to. And 0, 0 cannot be my test point because it goes through 0, 0. So then I pick any other point I want. So I'm going to pick 2, 0. So if I put 2, 0, that becomes 3 times 2 is less than or equal to 0. 6 is less than or equal to 0. That's false, so that means I want to shade the other direction. And I write my inequality over there. Okay, so I want you to pause and graph the next 6 and come back and check. Okay, so I started off by graphing number 4, has a y-intercept of 0 and a slope of negative 1, and it's a dotted line, and I shaded towards the quadrant 3. Remember, our quadrants go 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5, when I rearrange that, I got x minus 1 is greater than or equal to y. So that means it has a y-intercept of -1 and a slope of 1. And when I substituted in 0, 0, that was false, so I shaded away from the origin. Notice I'm also writing my inequality in the shaded region. Number 6, when I solved that for y, I got y is greater than or equal to 2/3 x plus 2. So that has a y-intercept of 2 and a slope of 2/3. And I shaded towards the origin. 7 has a y-intercept of -3 and a slope of -1/2. And I shaded away from the origin, and it's a dotted line. 8 has a y-intercept of -2, a slope of 4/3. It's a dotted line, and I shaded towards the origin. And 9 has a y-intercept of 2 and a slope of -1/2. Solid line because it's equal to, and I shaded away from the origin. If you have any questions on any of these, let me know. So number 10 now says the average value of a U.S. farm cropland has steady increase in recent years. In 2000, the average value was $14.90 per acre. Since then, the value has increased an average of $77 per acre per year. Write an inequality to show land values above the average for farmland. So meaning above the average means that their price is going to be greater than the average. So that means it's going to be y is greater than or equal to $14.90 plus 77x, where x is the acres. And that's all we had to do there. 11, an international shipping company has established size limits for packages with their services. The total of length in the longest side and the girth distance completely around is widest point perpendicular to the length must be less than or equal to 419. Right, and graph an inequality. So that means, so it says the distance completely around the package at the widest point. So it's the total of the lengths of the longest side, so that's length plus girth, has to be less than or equal to 419. So I'm going to graph this using my intercepts. So my x-intercept is when g equals 0, so it's length plus 0 equals 419. So that gives me an intercept of 419. And then my y-intercept is going to be the same thing. It's going to be 0 plus L or g equals 419. So I'm going to graph 419 and 419 as best I can. And it's equal to, so that means it's a solid line. And now if I check 0, 0, it says 0 plus 0 is less than or equal to 419. So I'm going to shade towards the origin. And I would write my inequality inside here. And that's what the graph would look like. So number 12 says Troop 200 sold cider and donuts to raise money for charity. They sold small boxes of donuts holes for $1.25 and cider for $2.50 a gallon. In order to cover their expenses, they needed to raise at least $100. So that means they want more than $100. So it's going to be 1.25x, because x is donuts, plus 2.5y is greater than or equal to 100, because they want to raise more than that. Now again, to graph, I'm going to use my intercepts. So my x-intercept is 1.25x plus 0 equals 100. So that gives me x equals 80. Then my y-intercept is 0 plus 2.5y equals 100. So my y-intercept is 100 divided by 2.5, which is 40. And it's equal to, so that's a solid line, And now, if I put 0, 0 in, that's not true because it becomes zeros greater than 100. And I want more. So I'm going to shade up here and I write the inequality. So if you have any questions, please bring them to class tomorrow.